I didn't think I would ever say yes, but I just did say yes. God, man, just having that stuff to look forward to felt so like I had missed it.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Before we start, if you want to support the podcast, you can do so for $1 a month on my Patreon, patreon.com/thiswasthescene. I also added a new tier. It's $3 a month, and you can get old episodes because podcasts platforms only hold the current 100. So there's a bunch that are not on there anymore. So I have it in one spot, and if you have the app on your phone, it'll play through the app, which is really cool. So go check it out and tell your friends. Brian McTernan is an American musician and record producer from Baltimore, Maryland. He was the lead vocalist in the hardcore punk band Battery, the guitar player in Ashes, and is the singer in Be Well. Brian operates a recording studio Salad Days from his home in Beltsville, Maryland. His studio is named after the Minor Threat song of the same name. In 2003, he formed Salad Days Records, a record label affiliated with Atlantic Records, through which he signed and released music by Moments in Grace. Brian's name has come up a ton in this podcast, so it was really cool to get him on the phone, and he is a really cool fucking guy. If you had a chance to check out Be Well, his new band, it's pretty great, and I've talked about it a bunch, especially that song Hello Sun, which I've brought up many times, and I also talked to him about. But if you're looking for some new music, go check them out. They're fucking great. I reached out to Brian, asked him if he wanted to do the podcast. He said yes. I got him on the Skype, and this is what we chat about. The song Hello Sun, like I just said. Battery, starting Salad Days, moving back to DC, almost burning out, what was/is he like in the studio, recording with Hot Water Music, what types of bands will he work with, Converge, Circus Survive, the power going out at Fest, the Turnstile story, and a ton more. Go check out Be Well and Salad Days on Instagram. I'll have links in the show notes. Go follow them, give them some love. Also check out my Instagram. It's This Was The Scene. Tell some friends because that's how you'll stay up to date with all the stuff. Also, when you go to my Instagram, in the top left, there is a kind of like screenshot of a Google spreadsheet of all of the episodes I did up to like 185. There's obviously a bunch missing, but it'll show you past ones that you can check out, and that's about it. That's all I got to say, so feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. Your name has come up a ton through these interviews. I've been doing this for about 5 years, over 5 years now, and there should be references to your studio or just you in general. Like people who've worked with you. I just did an interview with Jason Shaw from Harvard, and he was talking about you, and he was like, absolutely loved you.
Yeah, he's great. Love him.
So I really, like, I've heard your name, I've heard of Salad Days forever, and I never put the two and two together that was you and that. And then I did an interview a couple years ago, and they were talking about, like, Battery, and they're like, you gotta get Brian on. I was like, dude, he's probably done so many fucking interviews, and he's been asked the same question. So I'm pretty sure there's gonna be things I ask you that you've answered a billion times.
Oh, that's fine.
Because I've been looking through the podcast you've done in the last year, and it's just, you're on like Toby's from fucking H2O's, and
That fun fact, that was my first podcast ever, was with Toby.
really?
Yes. And it was cool because I was really nervous about it. I met Toby when I was in 6th grade. So like it was kind of like a little safety blanket. I met him outside a Dag Nasty show when I was 12 years old. In 1987 or 1988, something like that.
Do you like going backwards and like just reliving all this stuff and just unlocking all these memories?
Yeah, it's great. It's nice for me because in some ways it's like the benefit of doing what I've done with my life is in some ways the records, but for me it's like the things I remember the most are like the people and the experiences, and I've been really lucky to like be surrounded by pretty incredible people. So I never mind going back and thinking about it, talking about it.
Do you think because you've been so connected to the music scene for so many years that it keeps your memories fresh?
Yeah, I think so. And also because it's like, especially like the early memories were like are so cemented. I mean, there's kind of like, I think there was probably from like 2005 to like 2013. That's kind of a little bit of a like black hole in my brain because I was just doing so much, and I was so young when I started. So it's like that's kind of my origin story in a way, you know?
Yeah, I was just looking through your Instagram and you did a post with your brother or something where you guys it's to Mike XDNA.
Yeah, yeah, my older brother. Yep.
Yeah, and it's like this photo's taken 1980 outside the Gorillas Biscuit show in the Savari Club, and you guys are like, you look so young there. It's
Oh my
hilarious.
God. Well, I started going to shows when I was in fifth grade, so it's not, it's yeah, we were babies, and the funny thing is, it really helped me because like there aren't a lot of little kids like that at shows, especially back then when punk and hardcore were so much more underground than it is now.
Yeah, and brutal too, the live shows.
So, yeah, so when I started playing music, it was like, oh, the little kids band, let's put them on the show. You know what I mean? Like they kind of like had a sense of who I was already.
Real quick, I just have to say, I've mentioned this in a bunch of podcasts. Fucking Hello Sun, that song, I can't get through that song without fucking losing it.
Oh, thank you.
Every fucking time, dude, that chorus comes in, and I'm just like, holy shit, man. That song is so fucking good.
Thank you. That was actually the first song. It's funny that it wasn't on the first record. That was the first song I wrote for Be Well.
Seriously?
And yeah, and the funny thing about it was it was like too rock. I was like really scared of like I kind of was like, I'd been singing in like hardcore band just screaming. So it was like much more melodic and I kind of just got a little scared. And it
Wow.
didn't go on the first record, but it was like always one of my favorite songs. And then it was like once we started playing, it was like, oh, this totally makes sense for the band. Like this,
Yeah. Is that like a big hit when you guys are playing it now live?
yeah, like we typically open with that. It's a really fun one to play live.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like you just feel the fucking emotion in that song, man. It's just it comes through so fucking hard.
Thank you. That's really nice of you. Thanks.
Yeah, I had to open when saying that just because I've mentioned that so many times in interviews, and they're like, "Yeah, right? Like I can't keep it dry." I'm like, "I know. What the fuck?" But
That's really nice.
all right. So going back to again to where you were like the little kids band getting up there. So I could say like how you got in the scene, but I'm sure you've answered that. But fuck it. There's people who probably haven't heard you in other interviews, so we're probably gonna like I said we're gonna probably have some repeat questions, but
Yeah.
I'll try to keep something new maybe.
Well, like my older brother who is still he sings in a band called Damnation AD, still like really involved in music. He had a friend whose sister was into like punk and hardcore and was dating this guy in this like DC kind of early DC hardcore band called At Wit's End. And she just started playing music for us. And at first it was like the Smiths and the Cure and Depeche Mode, like new wave kind of stuff. And then it was like Sex Pistols and GBH and kind of punker stuff. And then I got really into it. I think part of it was like I was going to Catholic school and I definitely didn't fit in. So it was like once I was like, oh, there's this fucking world of like people who dress different and act different and listen to shit that's different. And I would get my mom to take me to like the record store and I would buy records and punk shirts when I was in like early in fifth grade. And then my brother and I lucked out because this guy moved in on our street who was like really into like punk and hardcore. And our parents trusted him a lot. And we would go over to his house after school and he was like completely fixated on finding music for us that we would love. At first, he was playing me like all this punk stuff, like Peter and the Test Tube Babies and stuff like that. And I thought I loved the sound of it, but I didn't relate to the lyrics. And then finally, it was like, oh, I know what you're going to love, and played me 7 seconds and then Dag Nasty. And I was like, oh, this is it. I love this.
What was it about that though that just like connected with
I
you?
mean, the lyrics felt like feelings I had. It felt like it was very relatable. It wasn't like God Save the Queen didn't mean much to me. But 7 seconds, I mean, they were singing about things that like I felt like could be my life. And I've always been huge lyric first type of person. We got into that, and then because my parents trusted him, and my house was like kind of chaos. My parents were pretty out to lunch when I was a kid, so they just let him start taking us to shows when I was like 10, and my brother was 12, and this was 1987.
Do you think like one of the reasons why you got into it initially was just to be cool to like your older brother?
No, I don't think so. I mean, yeah, in some ways, but I just remember he brought home the movie Suburbia, and I watched that, and I was like, I'm more like this than I am like the other people in my life. Like, I don't fit in with, my both of my parents have struggled with like mental illness, and like our house was like just chaos, and my other friends had these like prim and proper lives and all ate dinner at the table together, and my life was just unrecognizable to like the kids I was growing up with. So when I found punk, I was just like, oh, there's a place for people that don't fit in somewhere, and it just got me. And my mom was really great because like she could tell how much we loved it. She would take us to the record store and every week, and we'd buy records. And I mean, I could sit and just listen to the same record and read the lyrics over for hours and hours and hours. While other kids were like playing basketball and soccer and whatever, I was like holed up in my room listening to music.
Did you start writing at that point, or did you wait until you were like going to the shows?
I didn't start writing, but this funny thing happened, which was I started dating this girl, and her brother was played drums in a band. I would go to her house and I would watch them practice, and and this was in sixth grade, and I became like completely fixated on like watching them put songs together. I mean, I feel like that was the beginning of me thinking like a producer. Like I would sit and watch them like, oh, I have this riff. Oh shit, let's play it like, and like watching them. They were like this kind of like skinhead punky oi kind of band. And then one day the guitar player in the band, he was a straight edge kid. I was not that into like the oi skinhead stuff. I had gotten into like 7 Seconds, Dag Nasty, Gorilla Biscuits, like that stuff. And he was into that too. It's funny actually because I saw him, I ran into him last night. He just kind of like took me under my wing, and he started picking my brother and I up on the way to the Saturday matinees, which they always had the hardcore shows. Then he started a straight edge band, but they didn't have a singer, and he would let me come over to his house and watch them practice. And then I started singing. They would play covers at the end of practice, and I would sing those. And then I started singing over their songs. And then they went in to do a demo, and the guy recording it, this guy Barrett Jones, who went on to produce the first Foo Fighters record, and I Am the Avalanche, and a lot of other really cool stuff. But he said, like, they had no intention of me singing in the band. But he said, like, well, who sings at practice? And I said, me. And he said, well, go sing what you sing, and then I'll run it with that and without it just to have for fun. And I went and did it. I ended up bringing that demo to the guy that booked the hardcore shows, and he put us on a show with Sick of It All, and
Jeez.
was it.
Holy
And it's
shit.
funny because it's like full circle. That was 1990. I played my first show when I was in eighth grade, and we just confirmed a Be Well show in May in Germany with Sick of It All. So
Jesus,
like
man.
34 years later playing with them again, which is, it's just cool, man. Like hardcore and punk is so cool in that way.
Was that the only time you got to play with them?
That is the only time I have played with them. Yeah. I've seen them actually, maybe Battery played with them at a festival or something, but no, I don't. The other guys in Battery know them really well, but I don't know them. So, I mean, but the funny thing is then they were writing the lyrics up to that point, and I wanted to write my own lyrics. They didn't like my lyrics. They thought they were too emo, so I quit the band. Then I started Ashes from there, and that's how I really like started to learn how to write songs and write lyrics and like put songs together. And I was also lucky because I was doing Ashes with Matt Squire, who I've heard you talk about on your podcast as well. And he was just a brilliant musician. Like the two of us together, it was just like the chemistry was unbelievable. And we would just get together and write songs and listen to music and drive around. And that's really like, I think for both of us, probably we both grew a lot from that relationship.
So real quick, like going backwards to Battery, like when you get on stage and you're this little kid just controlling a room or trying to control a room, are people just looking at you like, what, fuck this guy? Or are they like, holy shit, this is awesome?
Um, the first show in DC, well, the thing is, we only played two shows before we broke up. The first show in DC was like people really psyched because people it's like this little kid up there, singing. People were like singing along. People had the demo. It was really cool. But then our second, our second show was in Richmond where people didn't know, and people were like, "What the fuck?" I mean, actually the video is on YouTube, and like I get up there and I'm like really like trying to be really cool and trying to get people to move up, and then right before we play our first song, the guitar player breaks a string, and so we're like up there. It's pretty embarrassing, but it's funny.
Wait, hold on. So, I mean, I'm probably gonna sound like an asshole. I thought Battery was around for a while. It was Ashes that was around longer than Battery.
So I quit Battery, and then this crazy thing happened, which was the demo we recorded essentially got bootlegged by, like, Battery stopped existing in 1990 after we played 2 shows, and
Yeah.
I started doing Ashes. And then my senior year of high school, I think my brother gave the label permission. A label had asked, but nobody asked me. A label had asked if they could put out the Battery demo on CD in Germany, and my brother and Ken, the guitar player, said yes. So I walked into a record store one day and I didn't know anything about it, and I see a Battery CD. I'm like, "Oh, that's so weird, Battery." And I'm looking at it and I'm like, "Holy fuck, this is our record." Honestly, up until like 2 years ago, I always thought it was a bootleg. But we got in touch with the label, and the label was like, "People are loving this. People are like buying this, and like it's really doing well. You guys should record a record and come over here and tour." So we had never toured here. Ashes had toured here, but Battery had never toured here. I dropped out of high school. We went to Atlanta. We recorded a record. We went to Europe, and the rest is history.
I was gonna say because you guys have done like all these reunion shows. I'm like, how the fuck do these guys do these shows if they played 2 shows?
No, we did a lot. So when I was 17 was when we went to Europe. And then I moved to Boston, and we were still doing Battery. Yeah, so Battery existed for a long time. And then we actually in 2017, it's what kind of got me back into playing music. I hadn't played music. The last Battery show was 1999, I think, and I hadn't played music since then until 2017. I played on people's records and things, but I hadn't written my own music or performed.
Why is it that Battery is asked to play all these reunion shows instead of Ashes?
Well, I think a couple things like Ashes. I think that when Ashes was around, Ashes was actually did really well. Like we did a West Coast tour and we did a full US tour when we were in high school, and the shows were really good and people really liked the band. But we broke up when everybody went. I went to start Salad Days and everybody else went to college, and we only played 2 more shows ever. And then we never really put out a full length or did that stuff. Where Battery had 3 full lengths, was on Revelation, like actually, and by the end, we toured Europe probably 9 or 10 times and toured the full US twice.
Oh my God! And you were how old when this was happening?
We broke up when I was 21. So
Jesus.
it was like a 4-year span. Like my like 1994 to 1999 for me was just fucking insane because I was still doing Ashes, I was doing Battery, I started Salad Days, and then Matt Squire and I started Milltown, which I think you talked about with Dave from Orange Island on here,
Yeah.
which was like a kind of a more like mainstream kind of rock-ish, and what had some like emo leanings, but it was like much more mainstream than anything else I had ever done. And we got signed to Warner Brothers. That era was just insane. It was just like so many things happening all at the same time. Like Batteries on Revelation, Milltown's on Warner Brothers, and I'm recording rad bands every day.
How does this lead into you starting your studio? Like, what is the bridge there?
The bridge is when Battery went to record our full length in Atlanta with our friend Issa. I, at the time, had just dropped out of high school and I was like not gonna have a career really. I wanted to do music. That's the only thing I loved. And we went there and our friend had a recording studio. And it was kind of like, oh, I mean, in the same way that like when I was a little kid, I would see bands play that were young and look like me, just a little bit older. And that is what made me believe that I could do that. You know, you go to a My Chemical Romance show at a stadium, you're not feeling like, oh, fuck, I could do that too. Like, you can't. You go to a show at like a VFW hall and you see a goofy 16-year-old and you're 14, you see him doing it, you think like, fuck, I could do that too. And so that we went to Atlanta and I saw Issa, who was a few years older than me, doing this awesome thing. And Matt Squire had like an 8-track in his basement, and we always recorded our own demos. And I was like, fuck it, man, I should do this. I mean, it's pretty like funny, the leap of faith. Thankfully, I didn't know how much goes into actually doing this because I never would have tried if I had known. But I borrowed a bunch of equipment from Matt and then had a little bit of money saved and bought some stuff. And I was fortunate because I was like, up until that point, the technology was that you really had to have like amazing amounts of expensive equipment to record. But right around that time, some like prosumer, some stuff that was like affordable that functioned became available. There was this stuff, these things called ADATs, where like basically I had a 16 track and a little mixing board, and it wasn't expensive, and it wasn't like awesome, but it got the job done. So I bought that. I moved into a house in Boston with like a bunch of like Trey from Death Wish and Ben Shusett, who was in like 10 Yard Fight and Battery and a bunch of cool bands and just a bunch of people. And I lived in the dining room on the floor. And I
Jeez.
built a little studio in the cellar in Brighton, Mass. And I lucked out. Well, like the first like 3 months, I didn't have one band want to record. So I was working in a video store and like, fuck, this is gonna barely scraping by, literally fueled by ramen. Like I was so broke. And then one day, Rama Mayo from Big Wheel Recreation stopped by to see one of my roommates, and he was just starting Big Wheel. And he said, "Oh, I have this band. How much would you charge to like record their demo?" That was for Cast Iron Hike, and that was the first band I like recorded professionally.
How did you feel when you went in to do it? Like, were you semi-confident and said, you know what, I'll just learn on the way, or you're like, I need money?
I mean, I was confident that I could do it. But like, it was weird because they were older. I mean, I learned a lot from them. I lucked out because they were really good. And the thing that people don't always understand is like good songs and good players just sound better. I didn't have the tools didn't exist the way they do now to take someone that sucks and make it sound like they can play. so I mean, they were like really good. They had the drummer hit really well. He knew how to tune his drums, and then they were also very well respected. And then so the demo we did turned out so well, they decided to just make that the record. And then they were very well respected in the Boston music scene that was really on the verge of it was beginning to turn into something really special. So you had, I mean, that first year I was in Boston, I recorded Converge, Piebald, Cave In, Cast Iron Hike, Hatchet Face, all local, Six Going on Seven, like all these amazing local bands. And then really the first like big break where I completely lucked out again was I had known the Texas is the Reason guys from their other bands. Norm played in Shelter and Ashes played with Shelter. Garrett was a roadie for Split Lip and Ashes played with Split Lip. The drummer was in Resurrection. Ashes played with Resurrection. So when they heard I had a studio, they said, "Oh, we have a new band. Can we come record a demo?" And the same thing happened where they came up. Definitely no one had any thought that that would become the record. I mean, they hadn't even played a show yet. And we recorded that first EP. We never even really properly mixed it. Like I just got up and ran it off before they left to go back to New York, and that's the record.
Oh my
And once
God.
that came out, it was just like, I mean, I was recording bands 7 days a week from that point on.
Did you kind of like recognize that shit was just taken off for you, or was your head just down and all of a sudden one day you looked up and you're like, holy crap, I just did all of that?
I mean, I didn't understand the scale of it because I don't think that like back then there was like no internet, right? So it wasn't like I didn't have a sense of like it took a while before it was like, wow, Texas is the reason it's like getting big. And then it was like I was charging like $10 an hour or like $15 an hour. I was
Wow.
barely scraping by. So it was far from feeling like, oh, I'm on top of the world. It was just like I was working hard and I didn't really know what I was doing. But the thing that I had was I did know what it was supposed to sound like.
Well, what does that mean though?
Like Battery or like when Ashes went to the studio, right? With this local dude that doesn't know what we're going for. We have to like play him records and try and explain the types of sounds we're going for and all that. I knew exactly what these bands should sound like. Like I maybe didn't have the technical expertise to execute it the way that I did now, but I did have a sense of like this is what it should sound and feel like. And nobody had to show me anything to know that. I just knew it because I was young, I was playing with them, I was in their world, and that makes up for a lot of like lack of skill.
Well, what was like your style then when you first start off? Because I mean, you as a if you're recording bands, you have to be like, hey, do it again, do it again. Were you nervous telling people to repeat stuff, or you just like had that confidence built in you?
No, I wasn't ever really super nervous. And like there was an arc to it. At first, it was like bands were coming in. Most of the shit we were doing back then was live. As time went on and the bands got better and I got better, we all like, I feel like that era of Boston, we all grew. Everybody was like getting better and like raising the bar on everybody else. And I think that's a huge reason why there's so many of those bands that are still so important because it was like there was so much like and nobody sounded like each other either. Like it was just like Piebald, Caven, and Converge and Bane all play together all the time, like or Orange Island or Milltown. Like it all just somehow worked. Early on, it was much more like I think bands because I was young, I wasn't like an intimidating presence. I think people felt comfortable. Oh, can I try that again? Or like when you're nervous and you're tense, it's really hard to play well. So I think at least the environment felt like safe for people to do their thing. But then through the Milltown process of like signing to a major label and starting to talk to producers and talk to like label people about what producers do, like I didn't know even what that was because I was I had never worked with a producer. Like every time like Ashes recorded our record in 2 days, Battery recorded our record in 3 days with our friend. Like we never did what I do with bands now, which is really work on the songs and the arrangements and then record it and then really push to get great performances and then take that and try and put a soundscape over it and make it something beyond what happens in the room. I didn't even know that that happened until I started meeting older people who had more experience. And I feel like one of the benefits I had was that after I had had that experience of meeting all these kind of big time producery type people through Milltown, I wanted to be that. And I started like really like the Six Going on Seven Heartbreaks Got Backbeat record. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that was the first time I feel like I really produced a record. I was living with Josh, the singer. We were roommates, and I went to the rehearsal space with them and like worked on the arrangements. And we would just go get coffee and look at the lyrics and talk about the songs and really like dig into it. And it's an incredible record. And then I just got a taste for like, man, when you fucking work hard and make it amazing, it's like so much better, you know? And I think that what was cool was there weren't now there's like a ton of amazing young producers who are like in the world and know exactly what bands want and are affordable to make records with. But back then that wasn't a thing. I didn't know of any producers in the like punk world that were like working on arrangements with bands and really like trying to elevate the songs. And that was something I did very early on or tried aspired to do.
So I mean, if Discogs is pretty accurate, like I'm on your Salad Days profile, and the Six Going on Seven is this is in like '97. Were you talking about Method Actor?
No.
Okay, because I'm like I put in the years, not the catalog.
Yeah, so it's Heartbreak's Got Backbeat is like I had done their first full length, but like Heart which was Self-Made Mess that just got re-released on Iodine. But Heartbreak's Got Backbeat was like the first one first record I really feel like that's when I was like, okay, I am doing something different than just setting up mics and pressing record now.
Like I'm trying to just find the order of everything here because it's got like the catalog number, but then it's got year, and I'm trying to think because I'm trying to see like where as you're progressing, like how what are the records are that you're going from like the beginning till present.
So very soon after we made that record, I left Boston and I moved back to DC. My wife was going to grad school in DC, and we have our 30-year anniversary this Saturday.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So she was moving back, and our families were in DC, and Milltown had broken up, and Battery was still together at the time. So it was like it made sense for me to move back. So I moved back to DC and kind of started over, like rented a house with my wife and my friend, and just started recording bands out of that house.
Were you
And
kind of nervous when you did that though, that you were going to lose clients?
I was I was very nervous about that because a lot of what I was doing was like Boston
Yeah.
centric stuff when I was up there. But then, I mean, it just kind of like I still did a bunch of like that year when I moved to DC, I still did a bunch of Boston bands. Like that's when we did Cave in Jupiter, and we did the Piebald Rock Revolution EP. I did Reach the Sky and like a bunch of stuff in that year. But that year when I was in the house, I was saving up to buy something where I could actually build like a more professional studio. And that year, I mean, I just did a lot of cool stuff. That's when I met the Movie Life guys, and I did the This Time Next Year, and we did a Frodis record that was really great. Like it was just a really I did that was a fun. It was the first time I recorded Strike Anywhere was that year. And then I was only in that studio space for 9 months, and then we bought a house. And it's funny because I took a break from working on the new Hot Water Music record to do this podcast, and
Oh, Jesus.
I was thinking that it's funny that we're talking about it because I was building the Beltsville, my first like proper studio that I built, and I was in the middle of building it, and I went to see Hot Water Music with, I think it was Saves the Day and Alkaline Trio. It doesn't matter, but I was talking to their bass player because Ashes had played with them. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm building a studio down the street." He's like, "Oh, cool. Maybe we'll stick our head in on our way out." So on their way out of town, they stopped by, and I was in like full construction mode, and they were like, "Maybe we should record here." And then that was, the first Hot Water Music record I did, Flight in a Crash, and I mean, now I'm working on the fifth full length with them.
Oh my God.
It's really cool. Like one of the things I'm like proudest of in my career is like the relationships that I've maintained in a lot of ways. Like I'm still really Aaron, who is in Bane and Converge, is in Be Well, and like Steve from Cave In I still talk to. Like all these guys are still like a part. These people are still a huge part of my life.
I mean, I'm friends with some people who have recording studios, and they just like live there. Like, how do you find a balance between that and not being in the studio?
It was really hard. Like that era, once I built this studio in Beltsville that I then ended up selling to Matt Squire, and then he worked out of there for a long, long time. But I worked 12 hours a day, at least like 7 days a week, and I didn't take days off. And I mean, it's funny because like I can't even imagine doing that now, but I was never really tired. It was just so exciting. And I was so busy that if I didn't do that, I would have had to pass on a lot of records I wanted to do or spend less time on them, which I didn't want to do either. So it was cool because we lived in the house, and then there was a band apartment downstairs and a studio, like a building behind it. At least like my wife was there, so we would see each other and she would hang out with the band. So it wasn't like I'm at the studio and I'm never seeing my people. When I started having more and more success, I ended up getting a manager. And the first thing my manager said to me was like, "You have to take at least 1 day a week off, like, period. You will burn out. You will start making bad records. You will start making mistakes." And that was really good advice. But I mean, it still was a lot. And the other thing that was crazy was like the bands lived with us. So even when there was a day off, we were like there, with the bands. Now I'm really good about it. first, I don't do a lot of like full productions anymore. Like I try and keep it to like maybe 2 a year, and then I do a lot more mixing and like songwriting with people, and sometimes people come and just track vocals, or like I'm not like on the hamster wheel I was when I was a kid with it. So it's a lot easier. My studio is only 2 blocks from my house. So I will come and work for a couple hours and then go play with my dogs, take a walk, go on a run, do something, come back, and it really helps me keep my head fresh.
If you like had to go back and if you were forced to for some reason to go back and work those long hours, do you think you
I just did it because Hot Water, we didn't finish the record when we were in Florida, and so the two of the guys came here, and we were working 14-hour days, 5 days in a row. And when the thing that I forgot is like when you're working like that and it's like so exciting and creative and so much is happening, it isn't just that how long the day is. Like if I could have gone home and just fallen right asleep, it would have been fine. It's that when I get home, I'm so amped up that I can't relax. Like then I wake up and my head is like, oh shit, we should do this. We should try, like I mean, it was really fun to do it, but not in a like, oh fuck, I want my life to be like this again.
That's awesome though to still have that energy, man. Because if you, just from being someone who's creative myself, like when you get in that flow, you're like, oh, this is what it's all about. It's not supposed to feel like work.
I mean, it helps too when you're completely and utterly inspired by the people you're working with and you never quite know what's going to happen. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the thing that's amazing when you work with like a really great artist is like what I try and do is point them in the right direction and then let them make it their own. And watching that, it's like a gift. I mean, I realize like so few people get to do that with their life. Like watch something that will exist forever be created. It's a really special thing. And the funny thing is, when I was making records all the time, I kind of like became blind to the magic of it in some ways. But now that I'm doing it a lot less, and now that I have perspective on like how much these records made mean to people, I have like a completely different reverence for it all.
When you hired your manager and he was like, it was he, right?
Yes.
Okay. When he was like, you got to take a day off for burnout. If you look back at that time, do you hear any releases you did prior to that where you were like, oh, I was a little off because I wasn't getting enough rest?
Not not really surprisingly. I think that when I look back, I think that maybe I was grouchy. Like not necessarily like mistakes on the actual records, but maybe not. There was a period of time when I had a reputation for being like difficult, like hard on people in a way that they didn't appreciate. Now that I'm more confident and more experienced, I have a much better handle on how to approach those things with artists. It's like a tightrope of like expecting more than people think they're capable of, but not crushing them. It's a balance. Like you have to like make sure that they know that what you believe in them and you love them and think they're capable of more, not like make them think that they're doing a bad job, right? I think when I was younger and when you're tired and you're, also like got your head on like, I'm going to finish this and then this other band's coming and then this other band and this other band. Like, I think that there were times when maybe I didn't do a good enough job of making people understand that like it isn't that they were doing something wrong, it's that they were capable of even more than the goodness they were already bringing. Now I just don't have those problems with people because I think that I'm become a much better communicator, and I just when I need a break, I take a break. And back then, like that was not a thing.
How'd you recognize that though back then?
I mean, it took me a long time. I mean, sometimes, I mean, it's funny because I think referencing Hot Water again, I mean, it's amazing that we're so close and that we've made all these records because the first record, my wife tells this amazing story of the first time she ever met Chris Wallard. She came home from school and he was standing outside smoking a cigarette and she said, "Hi." And he said, "Hi, your husband's a fucking asshole." Or your boyfriend or whatever it was. And we were, there were fireworks on that record. When they left, there was no part of me that thought like, oh, we're gonna work together again. Those guys are great and they're very mature people and they're very like soulful people. And they ended up going on a tour that was like Cave In, Thrice, and Hot Water Music. It was like a Brian McTernan tour. I went to the show and we just talked. Like we just talked super openly about like the things they were unhappy about. Like kind of like and I kind of said to them, "Well, hey man, if you don't have the songs written and you don't have the lyrics written, it makes it stressful and then we're fighting and like things are whatever." And it's so funny because it went from this like argument to like, "Oh, actually, we really like each other and there was more things that were good than bad." We decided that like next time I would they were like, "Well, why don't you come to Florida? We could like work kind of on our turf a little bit." They were able to say to me like, "Hey, when we want to get a weird sound or do something weird, we want to do that, and that's important to us." Or like, or if we want to whatever. And I was able to say to them like, "Hey, your lyrics are important, and like leaving that until the end to get written, we never know what we're sitting on. We don't know what the vibe of the record is, and you're running the risk of like." If you don't get it and it's not right, like the record could be bad. So like they committed to me that they were going to have everything written, and I committed to them that I would be like more friendlier about like more respectful about things I thought they could be doing better and like more adventurous with the kinds of sounds we were getting. And I mean, honestly, I look back at that and it's like I grew so much in that one conversation. It was things I needed to hear, and it was from people I really respected. It's amazing because we're 23 years into making music together at this point. When they walked out, I thought we would never talk again.
Did you notice like the sessions you had after that with other bands, you personally felt a bit connected to the band or less stressed in this in the environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like I that was like a point when I started, being more the beginning of being a little more like thoughtful about how criticisms came out. And I mean, that took a long time. I mean, I was young, so you don't have a lot of life to like draw upon. The other thing that's interesting I realized looking back is that I always heard the things that I hear now. Oh, this could be like this. Maybe this bridge should be the chorus of the song. Oh, this should be in a different key. Like the things that I work on with bands, but I didn't have the confidence to just be really straight about it and present it in a like fun, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we tried this kind of way? I would try and like get those ideas in, but not in a direct way. So people were like, thought I was just being a dick and thought that I just didn't like what they were doing. There's the downside to getting older and doing this is, you don't have the same energy you have, but the upside is like the wisdom and experience of being through this and navigating. I mean, great bands are made up of real characters, and you kind of realize that like it can't be a one size fits all approach. You have to be able to cater the way, not just the way you're recording things, but the way you're interacting with people to like who they are. Trying to make them do everything on your terms is like just swimming upstream.
Have you noticed because it's such a difference in, say, like personalities in general from like early 90s to present day and just people, the way they react to something, right? Like, or maybe just, I don't know, people are a little more sensitive, less sensitive. Have you found that like newer bands that come in, is there a different way you have to communicate with them, or is it just the same across the board as it always has been?
It is, I mean, I think one thing that is like one of the reasons do I don't do a lot of younger bands is like there is definitely a culture of like fakeness and fixing things. I am much more of a like I don't want to grit edit the drums. I don't want to trigger everything. I don't want to auto tune it. Like I don't want to copy and paste the choruses. I don't want my workflow, I think doesn't always work exactly with some of the younger bands. I mean, sometimes it does, but to be honest, sometimes it doesn't.
Have you tried any newer bands where you've gone through that experience and you're like, oh, this is the ask nowadays?
Yeah, I have. I have done some younger bands, and sometimes it's great. But I, more than anything, I realize too, like when I'll sometimes have calls with bands, I realize like, oh, we're not on the same page. Like this doesn't make sense to do. The thing is, there are a million people that are amazingly talented at doing what I do. One, I never want to do a record where it doesn't feel like a good fit. It's not fair to the band. Like you're not doing anybody any favors by pretending that you are into things you're not into, right? When bands want to just like, come in and the drummer sucks or whatever, and like, "Oh, we're gonna just grit edit everything. We're gonna copy and paste this, and we're gonna just, do all this." Like, if that's what people want, I'm really honest that I don't do that, and I have no interest in doing that, and I won't ever do that.
Real quick, if you're looking for an explainer video or someone to do motion graphics for your company, check out my company, drive80.com, and you can email me at mike@drive80.com for more info. That's all I got to say. So now back to the interview. I was going to actually, I had that as written down as like what your criteria is to get a band to come work with you, but I think you just nailed it and just answered it for me.
I mean, it's a combination of like I feel like there needs to be like chemistry and there needs to be a shared vision, right? Like I try when I have conversations with bands to be very upfront with what I think the areas of growth are. And depending on whether I'm not going to ever blindside a band by like kissing their ass in a meeting and then getting into the studio and being like, actually, I don't like any of this. That's what happened to Milltown. I learned more about what I don't want to be from a producer as a producer from the guy that we hired than what I did want to be. Like he basically, we did pre-production. He was like, "Oh yeah, everything's great." And then we get to the studio and he's like complaining about this and we should change this and that's stressful for a band. You're kind of like, "Wait, I thought you loved the band." But if you say up front, "Hey, I love the band, but I think that these are the things that could really like the areas of growth. This is what I think we could focus on to really like elevate what you're already doing." And if people don't want to do that, I'm the wrong person. And that's totally fine.
Who's like a band from like when you were first starting up? Because I'm looking at your list right now. It's like, it's incredible. I mean, some of these I was like, I didn't even know that you produced it. Like it was just, it's fucking wild to me. And like, which in the beginning, because you mentioned Texas the reason earlier, but what record when it came out and just like went fucking ape shit, where you were like, oh my god, like that, like you noticed it.
I think it was much later. I think the first time, see, what's hard is like when I look back now, there are like records that are real milestones, like Cave in Jupiter and like that, but that didn't happen fast. Like when that came out, people were not excited about it.
Well,
People
it
were like,
totally changed their whole
people
sound.
were freaked out about it. I think the first record I did where it was like really felt like, holy fuck, this is like a big deal was Thrice Illusion of Safety.
Mm.
Like I had done a bunch of popular bands at that point. Like Hot Water is obviously like was big, but like when Thrice Illusion of Safety came out, that was like a kind of like a change in the scene. Like it was like a big thing. All of a sudden, like almost everybody I had recorded up until Thrice, I had a prior relationship with. And Thrice was one of the first bands actually ever that I didn't know them at all, and I had no relationship. I didn't know anybody that knew them when they came. I just liked them. I mean, the funny thing is, like, they're some of my closest friends. I mean, I can't say enough good things about them as people, band. Like, they're just incredible. When that came out, it was like, oh my God, this is a big deal. Like this is a real thing that's happening.
You know, it's funny when they first came out. When that record came out, and then Artists in the Ambulance. Like this is the era where the scene was changing, and I was like, ugh, these new bands fucking suck. It took me a while to really get into Thrice. I think like Beggars was like the album that got me into that band.
Yeah. Yeah, Beggars is a cool record.
Yeah, dude. Like I listened to that, I was like, holy shit, this is what these guys are like. You know, obviously they was more mature, but there were some
Yeah.
bands I wouldn't let myself get into just because I was just kind of like annoyed at the time. And then when I go back, I'm like, oh my God, like I can't believe I missed this.
I mean, I think both Artists in the Ambulance and Illusion of Safety, they're like really musical records. They've aged very well too, I think. Like I mean, they're such creative people, and Dustin always wrote really incredible lyrics for such a young person, and their musicianship. Illusion of Safety is like all no click track, all the tape, no editing, no tuning, nothing. Like they played that way. Like it's just incredible how good they were then for for kids.
So I'm kind of like looking down the list here. Just for some bands are sticking out to me. Just want to ask some questions about just the recordings, and I do want to talk a little bit about Be Well if you have time.
Of course.
Just Converge, right? How to just be in the studio because the music is so fucking intense. To just sit with that for so long, does that like do you get to a point where like I need to go outside for a minute?
I mean, no, but the thing I don't think like people realize is like we didn't spend very long on that. Like that stuff. Like bands would come in for like 2 or 3 evenings and we would record the whole record. It was like nobody had the money to do it. Nobody had the time. Everybody had jobs. It wasn't like now it takes me a month or 6 weeks to make a record. I came across like my calendar from like 1997 and it's like okay, this month there's like 8 bands that are all coming in. People would come in for like a couple hours and a couple, it wasn't so Converge. I mean, my recollection of Converge was it sounded like nothing I'd ever heard, and that Kurt was like a very, very special and talented guy. Like he was super smart. The kinds of sounds he wanted were unusual. I remember even saying to him, like, you should record bands. Like he had a unique ear back then. Like it was clear to me. I don't know. Saying I produced that is a stretch. You know what I mean? I set up the mics and created an environment where they could afford and felt comfortable to make their music, but I didn't have a lot to do with it aside from recording it.
I was gonna say I can just imagine what it's like to be for just some bands like that. You're like just witnessing that and just being like, holy shit, what did I get myself into? But this is amazing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my recollection of Converge was stressed out because the drummer had 2 kick drums and I only had so many microphones. So it's like, I mean, that's funny what you remember, but I mean, I had already known Aaron and knew Kurt before they came in. So it was casual and it was cool. They were a really good band.
So I had Ryan Green on, and I asked him if he ever listened to any other music that's out there just to kind of see what's up, or maybe kind of just be like, oh, that's a cool thing. Like, unlike Steel, but, some people like pick certain things from other people. He's like, no, I never do that. Like, for you personally, do you keep your ear open to other recordings to see what's going on? Or did you do that through your career?
Well, like I listen to music a lot and I am completely inspired by music. And so in that sense, I do like if I hear like my my taste and my approach and all that is like kind of formed by loving music and listening to music. I don't like reference other people's mixes when I mix. I don't want my records to sound like other people's, so I'm not like checking it out to like stay current. I'm not like it's funny because sometimes people will be like, "Oh, if you're not doing this and this, are you worried you're not going to be competitive?" And I'm like, "Nope, I'm
You're like,
not.
look at my catalog, bitch.
I'm not competing with anybody." The thing about it is like full disclosure, my approach is a less safe way to do it, right? If you come into a studio and you have your Pro Tools template that you always use and you have your assembly line you're going to run the band through, that is a very safe way to make a record and you probably are always going to have a certain quality that is always there, right? It's always there. I want home runs, not base hits, right? I am definitely willing to take some chances to that end. I want to make records that like I am look back and think like, wow, like so much cool shit happened that like only could have happened in that moment with that group of people in that space. Not like I use someone else's drum samples and oh, I'm like just guitars are like a plug-in and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not what I do. I'm not inspired by that. Sometimes I think like I'm not like a cook. You know what? I'm trying to be a chef.
Well, it's almost like you're packaging the experience that was in the room that whole time, and you can feel it in the record. Like it just gives it this authenticity that people can sense that too.
I mean, the approach should be shaped by the artist, not the producer, I think. I mean, like, my job needs to be flexible and to figure out what needs to happen to do it. But like the thing about it is like there's much safer ways to make records than just like no click track or like when we did the Turnstile record, I was like, no, fuck it, like this feels better without the click, and it was kind of like, oh, really? Like, oh fuck, but it did.
So selfishly, there's a couple on here, just real quick. So Circa Survive, Juturna.
Yes.
I remember that sampler came out from Equal Vision, and there was like their first two songs were on or something, and I heard Great Golden Baby, and I couldn't stop listening to that song for like years.
Yeah.
That record, to this day, the first 5 songs from that record are on my Spotify playlist. It's so good, and that's like right when he left Seosin, goes back home, cancels his plane to go back to California, and just starts this fucking band. And that record, like, what was that like experience like making that record?
Really super super amazing and really super super stressful.
Really?
Yeah, like you'll probably hear this a lot from me, like as we start talking about these records, but I fucking love those guys. Like I love them. I would do anything for them. I'm so inspired by them. But that was a situation where they had never played a show. Their drummer Steve, who's amazing, had never really recorded. Anthony was coming off Seosin. The songs were like really, really, really long and needed a lot of work. And Anthony, he's so fucking brilliant, but like some of the lyrics weren't finished, and like he wasn't using implied rhymes and rhyme schemes with it that is well it can really make things like much more of an earworm, like get stuck in your head. So it's like I remember like working with Anthony, kind of like explaining like implied rhymes. Like it doesn't need to be like the cat in the hat, kind of rhyming. Like you can just use sounds that feel that way. And those guys, like they hadn't really had that kind of. Anthony had recorded with Bo, who's amazing, but like like that record, we were trying to make something unusual that hadn't happened before,
Yeah,
and
and you fucking succeeded, man. It's so good.
it was hard, but it was amazing. Like Anthony, we just had so much fun. Like he sang in the control room with me, like just standing behind me, and I'd be like jumping up and hugging him after takes and high five. Like we got into it, and we had just a fucking unbelievable time. But then there was also a lot of we worked on it for a long time. The guys, they'd never even played a show, so it's like you're pushing and pushing and trying to make this thing that's like going to be totally amazing, but you have no idea if people are going to like it or ever hear it even. And it was like EVR like really believed in the band, and like I feel like I owe Equal Vision so much. Like Steve from Equal Vision and Dan like gave me so many opportunities in my life that maybe I hadn't even earned yet, and I really wanted to kill it on that record. And I'm really proud of that record. That's a good one.
I couldn't stop listening to that record. I was sitting there with like my mouth dropped when I first heard it. I'm like, I've never heard anything like this. And it was just like every single thing about it was just fucking insane. Was Suspending Disbelief, was that recorded in those sessions?
I never know song titles.
Okay. Okay. This was like a song. It was like We Understand What It Means to Break Down. I'm not gonna sing it. It was on their EP. It was on like a sampler or something with Handshake to Sunrise.
I think some of them were recorded there and some of them were recorded. I can't remember because I don't think I even have that EP.
And just I was talking about just the one thing in On Letting Go, that beginning. That was you, right? I'm just like reading this off of
Yes,
Discog. Like
yes,
hopefully it's
I
not
did
like
on Letting Go.
okay. So that beginning guitar riff where it sounds like a freight train coming through. How did that come about? I just thought that's the one part from that record I needed to have.
I can't remember.
Oh my God. I just like it's so just like I don't know, it just opens up so fucking hard.
Those guys they just have such a cool way of writing and hearing music. Like I'm sure it was their idea, not mine. That's a really creative, beautiful group of humans.
It's the last the last one release I do want to ask about. Be well, Balance and Composure. I'm a diehard fan of those guys.
I love that band.
Everything they've put out, I have never been disappointed. Even their latest song that just came out, I'm like, my God, these guys are still amazing. So you only did Separation, or did
I
you do
did
the thing?
I did
Okay.
I did I did Separation. Yeah, only Separation.
That, like, what were those? I don't know. I just even know because I just love that record. It's so fucking great. And
They were great. I mean, it's weird. They are a band that I don't keep up with as much as some of the other bands I've recorded. Like I love them, but like I think they were just like touring so much and then they went, pretty soon after that and did the next record with Will Yip. So it was like I was just not in their sphere that much, but it was a really awesome experience. They were like really fun guys to work with and I mean, I love that record. I think it's a beautiful record.
yeah, I just had to point that out because I have that. I have the vinyl and the things that we think we're missing. I think is the other name, the record after that, which is like so fucking good.
Yeah. I mean, they're great guys.
So when I was talking to Jason from Harvard, I was asking him about like, what was it like working with you? He was like, it was one of the toughest things ever. He's like, but it was a good way. He's like, it made me a better guitar player. I was like, what was Brian like? Because you've been very open about just personal stuff in like interviews and things like that. And I was like, in like just getting to know him in the studio, does he bring that up? He's like, yeah, he's like very open about talking about stuff. And we got to really know each other personally. He was like, I was a big fan. I think he was saying Battery. He's like, this is the time when you're like, oh, I'm not going to play with that band again. And then he like later down, he sees that you guys are like playing. He's like, I will go to any show that you fucking play with that band.
Yeah, he drove up and he made good on that promise. We played like a warm-up reunion show in DC and he made the drive. I love him. He's great. He's a great guy.
So like around that time is like, does this starts getting you back into thinking you want to play music and then like Be Well happens?
Yeah, so I guess I take back what I said. In 2012, Battery played the Revelation Records 25-year anniversary show. So that was the first show I had played since 1999 or whatever it was. That didn't get me back at that point. Like I had a lot of fun doing it, but it was like I wasn't at all like, "Oh, I want to do this." It was like very soon after that I actually like if you look at my discogs, you'll see in like 2013, 2014 like all of a sudden you just don't see records. I ended up feeling very very burnt out from making records and like a lot of it kind of tied in with like my daughter being born, kind of keeping those hours and also trying to be a dad and be a husband and like present at home and be as into the records as I like to be. It was just a lot for me and I kind of felt like my heart isn't in this the way that I know it was at another point and I kind of felt like I was still really busy, but I felt like it wasn't fair to the bands. The producer, I almost feel like I kind of have to love it even more than the band. Like, you know what I mean? Like my job is to drive that. And I felt like if what I'm doing when I'm leaving is like not thinking about it at all and like wanting to be somewhere else sometimes when I'm in the studio, that's when bands have other people that are willing to make it everything in their life, like it's kind of not fair. I needed a break. And so I left. And it was also at a time when like that was when I first started seeing bands come in without records written, like expecting me to write the songs for them and play the parts for them and do drummers that couldn't play and having to fix everything. And I just was like, this doesn't even resemble what I loved at all at the time. So I stopped. Actually, it's pretty funny because, and the funny thing about it is, three of the last records I did are three of my favorite records I've ever done, which is the Fireworks. I don't know what it's called, Angel Dust and Turnstile. All were like right leading up to that, and those were amazing. But the thing that was that when I'm invested in those records that way, I was then not being like the husband and father that I wanted to be. Balancing all of that, I really struggled with. And so I decided to take a break and I got a job as a project manager for a construction company. And then within 6 months, I was running this big company.
That's so opposite of what you're doing.
It
Except the operation part kind of matches it a little bit.
it's some ways, well, so like the background of that is I always built my own studios. So I like trial by fire kind of like learned how
Hmm.
to build things. And then when budgets started getting really bad in the studio, I started buying houses, fixing them up, and selling them. Balance and composure, I mean, that's a perfect example. At that time, my overhead was like $10,000 a month for my studio. And we spent a month doing that. and the budget was $6,000. So I lost $4,000 to make that record.
Wow.
But I loved the band and I wanted to do it. But it was like there's only so much of that you can do. So I was like buying houses and fixing them and selling them, and that was kind of how I was like keeping my head, allowing me to do some of the things, the smaller, not smaller, because I mean now Balance Composure is a big band, but at the time they were not a big band. But I mean, my thing with the budget stuff is like I think that I can honestly say there's never been something I really wanted to do that I let the budget stop us from doing or spending as much time as it felt like we needed to spend. Like that's never been the drive for me. To get back to what I was saying, like this construction thing, at first it was kind of fun just to be doing something else. And then when I was running it, it was fun to actually be making money. Studio had been hard for a minute. All of a sudden, like how I was talking about, like just being around these people all the time and like being so inspired by them, like all of a sudden I had the reverse where I was like either completely alone or surrounded by people that I just did not respect and despised. You know, like some of the people in that world were just not cool at all. And
This is the
um,
construction world?
yeah. And I like tried to hire some people that were cool. Like I ended up recruiting. I don't know if you know Paul Levitt. He's a really successful producer, but he
Mm.
burnt out too and was looking for something different. So I hired him. So it was like two producers out like building houses or whatever. But
That's awesome.
I during that I was feeling really lost in the world. And it was like I'm not going to give this up because like I at least can come home and like see my family and have weekends off and things like that. But I went from feeling like I spent my life and my energy doing something that really mattered to something that just felt completely meaningless outside of money, which I don't even give a fuck about. So it's like I was like lost and looking for something, and Battery got offered to play Revelation 30 and offered to go to Europe to play this big festival. And I didn't think I would ever say yes, but I just did say yes. God, man, just having that stuff to look forward to felt so like I had missed it. So it wasn't necessarily like I had missed touring so much. I just missed having things on the horizon to like think about, to look forward to. We did that. And like, I remember sitting on the plane coming home in 2017. Like, I really thought that would be the show in Germany. I was so convinced it would be the last time I ever performed that I flew my wife, my daughter, and my mother-in-law over to see it. And then I'm on the plane and my wife was like, you should do music. It makes you so happy. It's like an outlet you need. And I literally came home and just started writing, like writing I just said to myself, I'm going to write something every day. I'm going to do something creative every day. And that was the beginning of what became Be Well.
Did you feel like you were forcing yourself, or like when the beginning,
No,
like, oh, it just flew out?
it was the opposite. It was like a fire hose, like it opened
Wow.
up. Like it was like, fuck man, like years, a lifetime of shit I never said and I was ashamed of and shit that like I had kind of like, because I mean the hard thing is like it's hard to find oxygen for your own emotions when you're tied up in making other people's art all the time. And the other thing is like I really have struggled like with mental health things in my life. And the thing about being a producer is like you kind of have to be the fearless leader, like the captain of the ship who has things under control. I now know that I'm wrong because the artists I work with, I mean, I honestly think that like me finally opening up about some of that has made me feel even more connected to them, not less.
Oh, totally.
I was always afraid that like if people knew how badly I thought of myself, like maybe they would not trust me or, like you don't want to put your like future and livelihood and all this in the hands of someone that isn't stable. So I think it was a combination of like, I liked the way bands saw me as like together and I kind of like played into that, but like inside I had a lot of things that were not healthy. It was like the second I finally admitted that to myself, it was just like, it's like the floodgates opened. And I mean, to be honest, it's not like I I'm not like fixed. You know what I mean? Like I still struggle with things, but that time in my life, I was so depressed it was actually like scary. Like I could hardly get out of bed. Like I couldn't feel anything. I would do I was drinking a lot. Like anything I could do to not like feel what was like about to explode inside of me, I would do. And the thing that's like so beautiful about having done Be Well is like I realized like God, this stuff that I always thought was like only me is so universally felt. It's not like I don't have those feelings. I just don't feel alone with those feelings. And it's weird because like the Be Well record is like I one of the things that makes me the happiest about it is like my fear with that stuff was it was going to come out and people were just going to be like, this is so negative and dark. But because it's like a lot of heavy themes, but the response was actually like, this is positive and beautiful, and thank you for sharing this because I have those feelings too. And like music did that for me when I was a kid. We were talking about punk and hardcore. When I was listening to like 7 Seconds, and there's a song he says, "Daddy always told you do it like a man." Like it's like I was never like this. I'm not like I'm not super feminine, but I was never like this like athlete masculine type dude. And like hearing this kind of punk band be so like open and vulnerable, it really made me feel less alone then. I think it's one of the things that's so beautiful about music and the scene in particular is that like it really is a place where you can share things and be heard and seen. And I feel that way. It's really like, I mean, I feel like my marriage is better, my mental health is better, my physical health is better. Like, I mean, I have my struggles, but I can't even recognize the Brian McTernan that wrote that record sometimes, which is a beautiful thing. And like throughout my life, it's always been music that has been that for me, has given me an outlet for my creativity, for my emotions, like all of it. I mean, it's so cool. Like, and I feel it's not lost on me how lucky I am to have had the opportunities to do that a lot of people don't have.
I think it's a good, I wouldn't say timing, but it almost kind of works with the audience that's listening because I'm guessing the Be Well audience is probably mid 30s on average, probably younger because there's probably kids and people in their 20s and stuff, but like it's like mid 30s to like early 50s.
Yep.
And I think, and I'm 44, so like I'm not married, I don't have kids or anything like that, but I have a lot of friends that do, and I think that in this era, like a lot of my friends, their kids are like 10 and stuff, so it's new, or when they're having a baby, I think there's a point where I'm just speaking strictly to guys. I'm sure there's female listeners of the same thing, but as from a guy standpoint, I'm sure guys can relate to where they're like, I have all this responsibility. I feel like I have things I'm going through, but I feel like I can't do that because I got to be, let's quote unquote, the man of the house or the dad or whatever.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
think maybe like hearing your records, they were like, holy shit, man, like I need this.
Yeah. I mean, that is exactly what I struggle with, which was like finding space for my own emotions and also being responsible for this wonderful little girl. And the other thing that I struggle with is like I'm like at the fucking bus stop with the other dads and I'm like I'm not like these fucking dudes. You know what I mean? Like I'm you know what I mean? Like it's like I'm a fucking parkour kid. Like I like the same person I was when I was 22, you know. I also think that sometimes with parenthood, I think that people aren't honest about it. Like it's fucking hard. It's hard. It puts an unbelievable amount of strain on your relationship with your partner. It is hard to find time to like do the things that fulfill you outside of being a dad or a mom, whatever it is. Like, and I just think that people people like aren't honest about that. Like people aren't like, oh yeah, it's hard. Like it sucks. I don't get to see my friends anymore. I don't get to go to shows. I don't get to I don't. My whole life is like driving kids around and picking things up. Like it's okay that that's, but it is like I am a fucking artist. I'm a musician. I'm a creative person. Like I need that to be happening for me to be happy, and I need to be happy to be a good dad. So it's like finding that balance was really, really hard. I'm not saying I have that balance, and I'm far from a perfect father, but my daughter knows she's loved and seen, and that's all I can really ask for.
Yeah, that's a pretty good good ask, man. Well, cool, dude. So I'm gonna start wrapping this up, but I gotta say that Meaningless Measures, that song is a fucking banger, dude.
Thank you so
Like
much.
that goddamn breakdown. I remember my buddy Chris Conti, who's probably listening to this because he's a huge Be Well fan. Um,
Oh, hi, Chris.
it was like a couple of years ago, or when the song came out, he's like, I was like, yeah, look over new music. He sends me the link. He's like, listen to this, and I was like, sometimes people send you music, you're like, oh, okay, like it's maybe 1 out of 100 you actually like kind of dig. And he sent me this, and I was like, oh my god. But yeah, the song, it's fucking great. I had to say that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's fun. Really fun to write and to get to, like, I honestly don't know how it all worked. I can't think of that many like late 40-year-olds that start a brand new band and it works. And
Yeah,
so
I was thinking the same thing, man. It's hard.
I feel really lucky and appreciative, and I feel like recording bands and not writing for so long, I was almost in like a hyperbolic chamber, and then like opened up, and it's like, oh, right back at it.
Yeah. And I've seen you guys play twice. I saw you at Fest in 2021.
Oh God, when the
Yeah.
power went out.
I
Oh,
know. I walked in, I was like, what is happening right now? And you guys were like, it was like 15 minutes or something crazy that you guys couldn't play.
I think it was longer than that. Yeah.
But it was cool because the other bands I heard they came together and like kind of gave some of their time up so you guys could play longer. Was that true?
Um, no, like were the venue had us finish their set, but I Am the Avalanche offered for us to come finish our set and share their set time, which was like the fucking cool. I mean, they are so fucking cool. It's amazing. Like I love that band. They're such nice people, and like they offered, and it was like we were never going to take them up on it, but then like my friend who was the stage manager was texting me like, hey, the guys are ready to get off at this time if you guys want to come down here. And I'm like, we're not going to do that. But it wasn't just like they like were prepared to let us do that, which was really nice of them, but we didn't do it. But I did get to see them and they crushed it.
Yeah, that was a fun fest. I remember I was talking to I forget who I was talking to, but they were telling me that the guy who runs Fest like literally kept it like just sold half the tickets because he wanted people to feel safe at the
Yeah.
festival, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah. It's funny now because since then I've done two Hot Water Music records in Gainesville. So it's like I'm like a local in Gainesville. But back then I hadn't spent very much time there.
That was so cool. That was like the first time I ever went. That was the only time I ever went to Fest, and it was totally worth it. And I live in Raleigh, and I went to see the Avail show that you guys opened for.
Ah, yes. Actually, Jason from Harvard was at that show.
Yeah, he actually no, he did say that when we were talking. The one thing I could say about you guys when or like actually like your whole band when you guys are up there playing, you can tell that you are just having a fucking blast.
Oh, yeah. I mean, hey man, once you like the thing is, I have the benefit of knowing what it was like to not have it in my life, right?
Mm,
So it's
sure.
like, I mean, the thing about it is actually, this Hot Water Music song I'm mixing right now, there's a lyric that says, every time there might never be a next time. And like, that is kind of like my, fully understand that. I'm not going to miss a minute of any of this.
I think this is good too for the people because this podcast, the demographic is probably like, again, it's the same demographic that listens to you guys. It's like mid 30s
That's
to
awesome.
like early 50s. And I think a lot of people listening, like they need to hear that because I think some guys or so anyone, guys or girls, women, men or women are listening to this and sometimes I feel like they're like, I'm in this job, it kind of sucks. And then I've definitely had some people come up after listening to these interviews being like, you know what, man, I was fucking motivated because of this thing you guys were talking about and I went out and did this thing. I'm like, that's awesome. It's just so cool because it just like hearing this is just helpful for people to just get off their ass.
It's awesome. I mean, I think that I appreciate you taking the time too, because I think the podcast, it's such a cool thing. It's like you can learn so much more than like so much of music journalism now is like rehashed bios. I mean, you and I just talked about everything from like my sixth grade girlfriend to like my midlife crisis band.
That's the best part because you can sit here for hours and talk, and people. I remember when I first got into podcast or listened to a podcast, I was like, 3 hours? Who the fuck is this guy? And then I started listening to it. I was like, that's all they gave me was 3 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're great, and it's a really great way to like really get to know artists, like hear, like get an understanding of like who they are as people, not just the like spin that's put out through, how much can you learn about someone in like a 3 paragraph bio? Not a lot.
Yeah, I feel like you can really make up a well-rounded opinion of somebody just by listening to them talk as a human being instead
Yeah,
of just some words like you said on the screen. And people are like, what was the tone in that? Like they sound like a dick. And they're like, oh, didn't really say it like that.
right.
Well, cool, man. So I'm gonna start wrapping this up. I finished with two questions, but before that, I ask, is there a story you've always wanted to tell that you've never told before in an interview that you'd like to tell now?
Well, I haven't had this. I haven't had the This is a very new story, but it made me, and I'm gonna tell you because
Perfect.
it just happened last week,
Okay.
and it just made me so fucking like I thought it was so funny. But Turnstile is like the biggest band in the world,
They're
right?
so good. They're so
And they're
fucking
so
good.
good, and they're honestly like incredible human beings, like just really fucking great people. But anyway, we're recording this hot water music song, and it's like this really wild song. It's kind of got like it doesn't sound like Red Hot Chili Peppers because they're singing over it, but it's like it's this bass and drum groove that's really wild. And I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to get Daniel from Turnstile, who's like really into auxiliary percussion, to come play like congas and rototoms and a bunch of shit on it. He comes over here and he didn't have rototoms because the rototoms they had on the Blink 182 tour they rented. And Daniel is sitting in my control room. One of the biggest bands in the world just played like under fucking Foo Fighters at Riot Fest. And it's like, well, I could just go to Guitar Center and buy some and then return them. I'm just like, you're still so fucking punk. I love it. I love you.
That's
So
awesome.
that's the story I wanted to tell.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that.
It was amazing.
Oh man, you never fucking give up those roots, man.
No way.
All right, cool. So, before I ask the last question, is there anything you like to plug? It could be about you, it could be about a friend, it could be about both.
Not that I can think of. I mean, I don't know. There's so much. I mean, it's hard, but there's so many people in my life are doing cool shit. But just, I don't know. I don't have anything I want to plug.
Any like organization that's like a nonprofit or something you like, or I don't know. I always think there's gotta be something.
Oh my God, my brain is mush right now. If I think of something, I'll text you.
Okay. Cool, man. All right.
Uh,
Oh,
no, actually, I would say
there we go.
I've been thinking and talking to my wife a lot about like people that go to concerts and go to and are in music should be carrying Narcan.
Wait, what is that?
Narcan is like the overdose prevention drug.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it's over the counter. And I think everybody that's like there's so many people. I mean, there's so much people that are struggling with addiction and I think a lot of artists too. And I think it would be well served. Like I always have it with me. My wife always has it. I think it would be good for people in music to always have it.
That's a genius thing to promote. I've never thought about that. I've never had come in a situation where that was necessary, but I didn't even know that was really a thing unless you're at like all these EDM shows or whatever that are going on.
Well, my wife is like huge. She used to run the methadone clinic at the VA, and now she's the harm reduction coordinator at the VA hospital. So she goes out and like goes with like needle exchanges and trains people on how to use Narcan, and really is like really active in that way. So we've talked a lot, and I mean, there's a lot of artists I've worked with that have significant substance abuse problems. So
Oh, wow.
you know,
Okay.
it
Cool.
doesn't it doesn't it's over the counter. You can't really like you can't overdose someone there. It's like it's a very safe thing to use.
Is it a shot?
It's like a nasal thing.
Okay. Well, that's smart. All right, so last question. What scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
Hmm. I think I don't know if this would be ethics per se, but I guess like the DIY mentality of like coming up in this world. So many people before me made things out of nothing and were kind of fearless and just like did shit, like didn't sit around and wait for someone to give it to them, or it's like you were gonna rent a fucking bingo hall and put on a show and do that. Like it has completely shaped everything in my life. Like someone saying no, that's not possible doesn't mean anything to me, because I've seen impossible things done by so many amazing people in this world.